I would ask anybody that wants to go to college or what have you is only escape to something equally or more difficult, right? And avoid the temptation to tell yourself stories that aren't true about why you're leaving. So, but if you use that rule, then you can't tell yourself that. Hello, Matt.
Rick, good to see you again.
Likewise. You're busy, man. I'm just lucky to carve out an hour of your time. Straight from the phone calls.
Schedule podcast now.
I know. It's weird. I'm like, it's literally on my schedule. I've scheduled my workouts now. It's super weird. Never had to do that before. Like put them on my schedule, or like Chamberlain will book me with like an interview or something like that. I'm like, oh.
Oh, yeah. You let Chamberlain have your schedule, you're in trouble.
But I'm stuttering my way through. Matt, did you know that if you purposely avoid experiences that give you joy because you think something tragic will soon occur and ruin everything, you suffer from a fear of happiness? It's called cherophobia. Cherophobia. CHERO phobia. Cherophobia. You ever heard of that? You're like, hey, I'm not going to do that because it's all going to end terribly.
Isn't that like our society today?
Yeah.
Scared of happiness?
Yeah.
So just focus on
all the negative
stuff.
Do all
the things negative.
It's not going to be good anyway. Something bad's going to happen. How about that for did you know? So if you have cherophobia, like lighten up, Francis. There's a lot of good things going on in the world. Don't take yourself so seriously. Humor with a touch of crazy.
That's
Come
right.
on.
Did you know that the moon has moonquakes, just like the Earth has earthquakes?
No, for real?
Yeah.
That's pretty
There's
cool.
Moonquakes, yeah.
Wonder where that comes from, because ours is like tectonic plates
Probably
shifting.
like an alien species inside of the moon is what I had to
they've been
guess.
waiting and watching us all these years.
Yeah.
And they're like, look at these apes. They're about to blow each other up.
Also, did you know that you lose a large amount of taste buds on planes?
No shit. Things do taste weird on a plane.
Mm-hmm.
Is it just the air, the filtered air, or is it the atmosphere? That's so helpful.
What would you do with that information anyway?
Why not? I'm still going to eat my snacks. I still want my biscuit cookies and
That's all
coffee.
you get now.
They don't give you shit, do they?
You ever seen the...
Like post-pandemic, they used it as an example. They're like, you can have one peanut or you can have a bag of empty almonds. It's up to you. I'm like, well, all right.
You know those like old photos of like planes trips in like the 60s?
Yeah, everybody's in suits and stuff.
Like there'd be like two rows of seats, but they're facing each other and they're having full course meals.
Yeah, no
so
more of that.
Luxurious and
now
enjoyable.
It's so... I enjoy travel, but the rigmarole, the planes, trains, and automobiles part, I do not enjoy. You feel like you're just being like cattle carted around, like everybody over, like get back in line, take your luggage off. What is this? What's your belt? Don't push your thing on the conveyor belt. They're like, oh my God. And then like people are just in general, like you mentioned earlier about, fear of happiness. People are just like bent. So it's like, heaven forbid they get called out for the random security screening. They have like a conniption fit. Oh, this is great. I got a bomb in my butt. And I'm like, don't say that.
Can't say bomb on an airplane.
Yeah, exactly. Don't say that at the airport, but like people just are so uptight. So it just kind of makes this like tense. I'm pretty good with it. I just put my noise cancelers on. And
that's good. I mean, you used to travel like 50 weeks a year.
Yeah, I've got it. And I still have diamond status. So I still get upgraded a good bit. And, I've got a new plan. I don't know why we're talking about this. Like, we're going to get to the point, you guys. But you're
what Did You Know did.
Yes. Did you know? A whole hour of that. So, did you know, Matt, like this is a for real, did you know that like there's a whole contingency of people, a sort of a subculture, if you will, of which I'm part of now, that tries to get on the plane dead last. Did you know that? It's sort of the opposite of all the yahoos that like crowd the desk and try to get on first because they got 18 carry-on pieces.
I do know that because I've seen you do it.
Oh, it's awesome.
And it's also a little bit rub in the face. It doesn't make sense actually with you because you were actually upgraded to first class at that point in time.
Doesn't matter.
So you're like literally, but it makes sense. Like that would be me if I didn't have to find a cubby space.
Right. Well, I've gotten to the point where flying out of Atlanta, you rarely connect. So I don't have to bring my luggage with me because you always run the risk of it not making the connection or whatever. But if you're just going from point A to point B, the chances of losing your luggage are pretty low. So I always check my luggage now. Even my little carry-on bag, I'll check it. So all I have is a light backpack. But what's funny is there's a bunch of people that think like me. So I'll be looking around at the last minute and they'll be like, last call for this flight. And I'll see some guy and he's on his computer. I'm like, you bastard.
Who can get on last?
Yes, it's like a thing. And sure enough, and I've turned a few friends onto it and they're like, dude, you're right. There's a whole bunch of ninjas out there and they get you. I'm like, I know. I wait till it's like this is the absolute last call, and I step in line, and some dude will step in behind me, and he's got this like shit-eating grin on his face. I'm like,
I mean, what is the rush to go sit down? I don't get it.
Yeah, and I feel like I sit down, they close the doors, and we take off. So it feels like they're waiting on me. It's awesome.
Yeah, trips less time.
Yeah, there you go. So, hey, there's a tip for you. If you check your luggage and you're not worried about losing it because you're not connecting all over the place, get on last. It's fun. Now, if you're on Southwest or some shit like that where you got to like rush to get your seat, like forget it. Like you got to get on early. If you're on JetBlue, you're definitely getting in a fight and getting kicked off. If you're on Delta, you're good. That's all I'm going to say. Everything's on JetBlue. They're like beating the tar out of each other on the internet. I'm like, I'm not getting off this plane. I bought this ticket. My sister's getting married. I'm like, you're losing your mind. All right. All that being
said. What are we talking about today?
I don't know, man.
I really don't even know what we're talking about.
Basically, you just like get to listen to us socialize and catch up. So what we are talking about today is whether or not it's worth it to go to college. It might seem like a really odd topic, but I think when you look at what we do, it's a combination of entrepreneurship and fitness. I love both. Really love entrepreneurship as much as I love fitness. We've talked about that a million times. So through the lens of entrepreneurship, should you go to college or not? Does the formula work? Does it make sense? And I think as with a lot of things, I would say it depends. Do you agree?
Oh, man, yeah, 5%.
Yeah. So let me read some stats for you. So the average college debt for a 4-year undergrad degree is $40,000 in the U.S. That's the average.
Okay.
That's not bad. I would say I thought it was going to be a bit higher, honestly, but I think you only hear about the most, outrageous stories. The average debt for a master's degree in the United States is $70,000. Average college debt.
That's like for the whole time, or
yeah, that's like the total student debt that people are carrying on average with those two types of degrees.
I thought it'd be higher than that. Okay,
I did too. And then people that have a college degree still on average make 20% more on average than people that do not.
Yeah, that's such a broad scale.
Well, that's the thing. When you look up these stats, there's so many variables, right? It's such a broad scale that I think that's what I want to talk about today, because we run into, I still help teach this entrepreneurship college at Kennesaw State, and it's interesting because you have people in there that have. This class is a master's class, and so like people have already graduated with an undergrad in something, and now they're coming back to school. It's always interesting, to talk to them, because I'm wondering why they're taking a class on something that even theoretically, like they're very inspired just to hear entrepreneurial stories in general, but yet none of them have really done anything yet. They haven't had the opportunity. So it's really interesting. It's just kind of like, well, you just need to get out there and do it. There's no theoretical setting or what have you that's going to teach you what it really feels like to be an entrepreneur until you become an entrepreneur.
Yeah, which I've heard other people talk about this a lot of, educational wise, it's almost better to go do something and then come back to whatever educational platform you're going to, because then you have actual perspective on it makes more sense.
Well, I've talked to friends about that lately, and it's like if I went back to school now, I'd be a much better student because I know exactly what I'm interested in and where my skill gaps are and where I could upskill myself, right? Whereas back then, you're just taking all these like core courses and stuff, and you're like, why am I taking this? Like, I'm never going to use this again. Now, I think, it depends. So let's back up to like, well, what type of people would need to go to college? And I think it's obvious. If you want to be a doctor, like my kids, like my son is a nuclear engineer, he's an officer on a nuclear sub in the Navy. Mm-hmm. You have to go to school to be a nuclear engineer. That's not something you can just work your way into. My daughter's a cardiac ICU nurse. You probably want that person to be going to school before they're like trying to keep you alive.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Getting your meds right. Doctors, nurses, attorneys. There are obviously certain classes and certain jobs where you absolutely have to have a degree. I think where it gets gray is if you're just in some general studies, like if you're in a liberal arts, like if you go to a private college and you spend $70,000 a year, and this is happening. Like I was talking to a buddy the other day. I meet him at the hiking trail down the road. He used to be a client, great guy, but he's got 3 kids, and the first one's getting ready to go to school. It's his daughter. She really wants to go to NYU. I think it's $90,000 a year, and she wants to major in like art studies or something. And he's just like, and he was in the Marine Corps. He's squared away. He's just like, I don't see it. And if he does it, it's going to set precedents for the kids behind him, right?
Sure.
And I think, I was telling him before my kids went to school, I read a book written by an economist, and it was basically like, what is the real economic formula about your undergrad versus your graduate degree and everything? And basically the cliff notes were, it doesn't make sense to spend a lot of money on your undergrad degree because it doesn't move the needle a whole lot. It makes more sense to spend, if you're going to spend a little bit of extra money, spend it in a specialty in your master's degree. To your point, maybe you get your 4-year degree, you go work for a while, and then you decide that you want to get a master's degree in finance or something, and that really lends itself to the position that you're moving into or your interest. That makes sense to spend money. And then maybe you go to, that would be like, okay, you go to undergrad at Georgia State, it's in state or what have you, and then you want to go to Horton School of Business after working for a few years. Okay, that's a good resume builder, right? Obviously. But outside of that, it didn't make sense to spend a lot of money on an undergrad degree at all.
No.
So, that's an economist. So he's wrestling with that. And then I think, for me, and I didn't finish. So I was in school. I was exercise science major till my second year. Then I switched to business because I'm like, well, I'm already doing what everybody in my degree wants to do, or my field, which was be a personal trainer, which was, by the way, a brand new thing, right? It wasn't like
first ever right here.
Yeah, first ever personal trainer. What? Call me Papa, Big Pappy. No, what is it? El Jefe.
El Jefe.
Yeah, I will from now on be referred to as El Jefe. But everybody that was in my major wanted to be a trainer. I'm like, well, I'm already doing that. And I was just about to open a business. And so I opened the business, and then I switched to business because I'm like, well, this will be good. I need business skills, right? And I could tell you that running a business at the same time that you're in business education, it was not at all the same. And so and the business was going well. We were making money. We were scaling. And so when I got to we were in quarters. That's how old I am. So we weren't in semesters. So I got to my last quarter. I think it's like 12 credit hours. I don't even know anymore that I had left. And I just didn't finish. And you could say like, well, you really should have pushed through and finished. And at first I was a little bit embarrassed, and I would agree with that. Now that I'm where I am, it has zero impact on me whatsoever. And I'm not sure that I would have even finish those last 2 years at this point in time. And that's just based on, again, my experiences, whatever. So,
sure.
And there's a lot of young folks that we run into who are in this, conundrum, and their parents are as well. And the old school thinking is you have to go to college. And I think there's some merit to that when you look at the 20%. But I think this data is a lagging number, as you know, right? It doesn't tell us maybe what's going on right now and what's going to be going on in the next few years.
Right.
So I think, when you look at the stats of coming out with a lot of debt, it's going to be hard to pay it back. Here's the story to add to finish up the stats conversation. I was listening to a news piece from Breaking Points. Do you ever watch Breaking Points? It's a great independent news source, by the way. So quick tip for you guys. It's great. They have a YouTube channel, and it's basically like, they just give you the news. They don't editorialize everything. It's like you got a guy that used to work for Fox and a girl that used to work for MSNBC, and they come together, and it's like you get these kind of neutral down the middle, and that's the way I like it. Don't tell me how to feel about it. Just give me the news.
Right.
They were profiling a study of this younger couple, like in their early 30s, and they live in D.C., and they're almost $1 million in debt.
Damn.
Yeah. They got 2 kids.
Like doctors?
Well, not right. I'm just like, what is that? So both of them have very advanced degrees, or they have advanced degrees from very prestigious universities, right? And they live in one of the most expensive places in the country, obviously. But outside of their student debt, when you broke each piece of it down, and I'm going to break that down, they're really not out of line in any of these categories. So it's just unbelievable that they're in this situation,
right,
while seemingly not making too crazy of decisions, except for the student debt part. So they combined, they had $330,000 in student debt. It's like, all right, that's a lot. And that's going to take for freaking ever to pay back. And by the way, student debt, it never goes away. Like they'll garnish your Social Security to get it. Like it doesn't like just go away at some point in time, right? Bankruptcy, forget it. You're paying it. They're going to get it from you, however they need to. So keep that in mind. 330 there was they had like $230,000 of debt in their home. That's not bad for DC. It's one of the most expensive places in the country to live right now, right? They had like $35,000 in car debt. Also not bad. When you look at the American average is like 40 something, right? It's like, okay, that's not bad. Now they did have like almost 170 or something in like consumer debt, like credit card debt. That's bad. But really, outside of that, when you kind of put everything together, it wasn't like they were like wildly crazy, right? That one little part for sure. And their combined income is like $230,000. So again, well above the national average, but they're living in the most expensive zip code, in the country. So, but you look at that and you're like, God, when you broke it down step by step and the way they reported it in this little news snippet, it's like you could almost see there's a bunch of people in that situation, right? It wouldn't be hard to get there. So if you look at the biggest piece of that, 330 something thousand in student debt with that crazy interest rate and how long it's going to take to pay that thing off, it's like, I'm not sure that's worth it. Right.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely in the last, 20 years, that's been the push as everybody goes to college. It's kind of the thing. I would say all of my friends, I have a couple friends who are doctors, lawyers, and yeah, they are all paying off their,
right.
still paying it off to this day. So, I mean, I could see it easily adding up and be bad in a couple bad decisions in there.
Right. So I think what are your alternatives? Like, let's say that you are of age or you've got kids of age and it's like they're knocking around this idea that they may not want to go to college. It's like, that's hard. If the general line of thinking is that your kid goes to college, right, and there may be some ego around that as well, it's like, how do you look at that lens? It's like, well, there's other things that you could do, right? You could go to trade school. I mean, shoot, you could learn how to be a really great welder and make $100,000 a year, right? Mm-hmm. It might take you a long time, especially if you go and get some type of liberal arts degree that's not specific. You're going to have to get into a field, learn about that field before you're providing any value to an employer, right? Mm-hmm. And then it's going to take you a while to get to that thing. But like if you are just a straight up baller welder and you want to work 60 hours a week and travel and go weld on a pipeline or something, you can probably make really good money. Now, it might not be the lifestyle you want, but it's possible. Mm-hmm. And then if you're entrepreneurial, you could take that and build a welding company. It could same thing if you're a plumber or whatever. So if you want to do a trade, probably not a bad trade-off. And when you look at the opportunity cost of giving up that income for the next 4 years while accruing debt and then coming out of college with no clear plan and not a degree that's going to generate a whole lot of income, it would kind of make sense that and if you weren't if you were just sort of undecided as a student, I think a lot of people do that, right?
Sure.
So I want to go away. I want to go to college football games. Not really sure what I want to do.
Yeah. I'm going to find myself.
Yeah. And look, man, that's another thing. Like, I think one thing, if you are that person, you don't know what you want to do. And you are buying yourself like 4 years to figure it out. Now, as long as you don't take a beating financially to do it, you've almost bought yourself an identity for 4 years where you can say like, hey, Matt, what do you do? I'm 20 years old, or you're 20 years old, and you go, I'm a student. It's like, okay, you've given yourself an identity,
sure.
You've purchased it, and
right.
You've given yourself 4 years to figure out what it is the hell you want to, what the hell it is you want to do with the rest of your life, right?
Yeah.
As long as, again, but if you're doing that while accruing like a massive amount of debt at like NYU or something, not a great idea. But if you're going to a state school, you're going to community college, it's like, it's not a bad thing to do. It's not a bad persona to put forward right. while you're figuring out what you want to do. I mean, you could also try school. You could go to school go for a semester, see if it's for you or not, right? But you could, again, any of those trades, you could go into the military. Obviously, a lot of people do that, and then of course, like you can get the GI Bill or what have you, and then pay for your college later. There's a lot of different directions you could take, or you could go to school. But I think in making that decision, there are lenses that you use. And I wrote them down, and I love these different lenses. It's like, okay, if you're wondering whether or not you should go to college, this is the lens you should put on this. It's like, if I choose not to go to college, as an example, I will only do that if I choose something else that's as challenging, if not more challenging, right? Yep. Because what you run the risk of is you go to college, you choose then or you choose not to go at all, or you go and you drop out, so to speak, and you choose not to go to college, and you don't have a plan, right? Because what you don't want to be is like 20 years old and useless. And, like you got to test it. Like, am I giving up school to do something as hard or more difficult, right? Lucrative even would be another term for that. I think if you're like, is there income potential in this? Am I moving myself forward? If the answer is no, then you have to say, am I just being lazy and useless?
Sure.
And I hate to use useless, but that's true. And so what can happen is, and you've seen this, like some of the most like grouchy people that I know are like in their 40s and they're still useless and lazy, right? And it's like it's not as cute when you're 40 to be useless and lazy as it was when you're 20, and it's not even that cute when you're 20 to be honest.
It's funny you're saying useless so much.
I know it's a bad word, but
do you have anything to provide society at all?
Well, let's say
do you have any reason to get up in the morning?
Maybe you don't. Why don't you jump off a bridge? No, that's a really mean thing to say. But I think it's the same thing. Like you could take that same lens on life. I like that lens for work, right? Like if you're working at a place and it's hard and you feel like, let's take our company. Like you have like worked through so many stages and you got so many more ahead of you, right? Now you're the VP of all club ops. That's a big opportunity. You're going to have a bunch of people working underneath you. There's a long runway. if you weren't wired the way that you are, you could look at that and think, okay, this is too hard, right? And then you would leave and go do something else. And then you could frame it however you want. I'm not appreciated. I don't, blah, blah, blah. Like, there's like a million ways to skin that. But I think what if you can only escape a situation, school, and I'll say even work, if you're going to pursue something, again, as or more difficult, right?
Yep.
Like if you're like, all right, I'm going to leave Alloy because I'm going to become the the COO of this big ass franchise. I got hired to do that. Oh, that's going to be a big, that's understandable. You're taking a massive step forward, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you're only leaving your job and you're telling yourself, I don't like it here, and it's simply because you're useless.
What are you trying to tell me, Rick?
No, I'm just using you as an example because you are wired the right way. Right. Like you do take on challenges and you recognize, okay, I have to upskill myself. Now it's not just me coaching clubs. I have to teach other people how to coach clubs and hold them accountable. That's a skill set. But I think in a lot of jobs, when things get hard, if people aren't wired the right way, they will leave. And and I would just say the only lens that you would put on it is if you are leaving for something else, equally or more difficult, then fine. That should be your deal that you make with yourself. And I think if you did that through school, work, or whatever, you're going to be better off. Do you agree?
No, I mean 100%. I mean, I think a lot of the people, being around you, obviously, I know your personality and stuff, but you hire people that are under that same umbrella. That's why you probably hire a lot of athletes that are used to having.
I love baseball players. That's what I said.
Been through it, been through the game of failure. They're tough, get some thicker skin. Won't, bow down every time there's a challenge or something hard comes their way.
Yeah. Well, I was talking to somebody about I love Matt and Jared, both guys here that have really stepped up and are in VP positions now and are just doing amazing. It's like, why is that? Like, how are they wired? And I was like, all right, so they're competitive. Like one of our core values is competitive spirit.
Right.
And they're competitive with themselves. Like they want to do well. And then I look back at both your backgrounds, both high-level baseball players. And it's like, well, in baseball, if you hit the ball 3 out of 10 times that you're at the plate, you're in the Hall of Fame. That means you're eating shit 70% of the time. So that type of person who's wired to understand that, you go up there and you follow the process, you do the basics, and sometimes you're going to hit it, sometimes you're not, and can't get too high, can't get too low, right?
Yeah.
That's a great personality for business, I think. Right. I really do. So I think that sport really helped you guys. So again, the rule would be, I would ask anybody that wants to go to college or what have you, is only escape to something equally or more difficult, right? And avoid the temptation to tell yourself stories that aren't true about why you're leaving. So, but if you use that rule, then you can't tell yourself that, right? And so the other option would be, if you choose then to say, okay, I'm going to take on something more difficult, and you want to get into entrepreneurship, you can still invest in education, even if it's not traditional education, right? Like you could go to a sales school, like a good one. There's a lot of just get rich quick schemes, not that. But you know how this is. Like if you have a skill of sales, then you can sell anything, and you probably will never go hungry because you could take a job selling cars or software or whatever. I mean, the framework of sales is very similar no matter what you're selling, right? It's fun to sell great stuff that helps people, but sales is sales at the end of the day. And then, so you could learn how to sell, and then you could learn how to produce leads to sell, right? And then you could learn the operation side, and you could increase your financial literacy. And it's like all those things could come together, and you could become an entrepreneur. Or you could do a mentorship. You could jump on someone's hip pocket. That's kind of what they do in the trades, right? You get a job as an apprentice and you jump in the hip pocket of a master plumber or a welder or whatever, and they show you the ropes, right?
Well, you mentioned, you didn't finish school. You may be embarrassed about it, but at this point, I mean, honestly, you could argue that you probably have more education if you stuck through the whole thing.
And honestly, that's what turned me off on it, because while I don't know if I ever told you this story, but I remember I was in a class and I told you this, right? Because there was a podcast we listened to that had a similar story where they were talking about hiring. Mm-hmm. So I already had the gym open, so I had hired 6 or 7 people, but that's not nothing, right? And I was in a class and we were talking about employment and hiring, and the professor was giving all these strategies and frameworks for hiring, and they were so dumb. They made no sense to me. So, me and my disagreeable personality, I raised my hand and I said, have you actually ever hired anyone? And he was not happy with that question, as you can imagine, because it was.
Do you know what you're talking about?
Basically, it's like, have you actually ever hired anyone? To which he responded, no. Have you? As a matter of fact, I have. And which everyone in the class just turns and looks at you like, whoa, really? I'm like, yeah, and I went on to talk about the business I had and the hiring. And of course, he looked like he had eaten a lemon. He wasn't very happy. But those kind of situations, they didn't make me think the education was useless, but I knew, having done what I was doing for 2 years already, I don't want to do anything else. Like, I'm like, this is for me. I'm probably unemployable by now already. Like, I love it. Like, you live or die by your decisions. And it's like, whatever, maybe it's like a gambling addiction type of manifestation. I don't know, but I loved it. So at that point in time, I didn't see the utility of taking time away from a growing business. And I had met Andrea, and it's like, okay, now we're going to get this family going. And it's like, look, man, I don't understand the utility of another quarter of this, the expense and everything else. And it doesn't mean anything to me personally. Now, it was my own ego that was saying I was embarrassed to tell people that I didn't finish when I had 12 credit hours or whatever, but like I could give a crap less now. I think you stack enough evidence in your favor that you are decent at what you do and you hit a few home runs. It's like, I think all that goes away, right? So again, in that lens of giving up for something more difficult, go upskill yourself in a way that will get you to where you need to be based on what you could see yourself doing in life. Like, learn how to sell, learn how to do this, learn how to do that. And I will tell you that a lot of parents, if you're that kid and you're hearing this and you're like, hey, I don't want to go to college. It's like, okay, well, you can't stay home and be useless and play video games. Like, you can't do nothing. Right. Nothing is bad. It's really bad. It can be really bad for you. So it's like, okay, what else are you going to do? And if you're going to aim at something else, I think it's fine. You might get some blowback from traditional thoughts. Sure.
But that's the thing. It's like, you didn't give up on education. You just gave up on that avenue of education. Well, you just pursued it in a different way.
Well, yeah, because then, 7, 8 years ago, I'm taking Harvard courses online. I'm going to the Ritz-Carlton education thing. It's Disney school.
That's all. You just chose a different path. I mean, I think what you're saying and being entirely useless, that's an entirely different discussion.
Right. Well, it's just not good. And so I think if you're going to be an entrepreneur, the first skill that you would learn would be learn how to sell. I think look for some mentors. I will tell you, as an entrepreneur, if I meet a young person who's a hustler, and they really want to learn, I'm always happy and more than willing to tell them and help them in any way that I can. And with the fact that I think a lot of folks these days, I don't know if this is true, and I almost feel bad saying this because it's kind of a broad sweeping statement. And I don't think all kids are this way, but people are seemingly a little bit softer these days than they have been, right? Like, everything has to be a perfect environment. There's a trauma, and I could list all the isms and the trigger words and the traumas. And I'm like, look, man, if you're a straight savage these days, work-wise, and you will invest in yourself and work really hard, you can dominate right now. Dominate. And I know some young guys doing it, and they're so impressive, and they're humble, they hustle. Again, it's not about working 18 hours a day. I hate that whole hustler culture thing too. I think that's so stupid. It's just about figuring out what the right levers are and making really good decisions, right? It's not about doing a bunch of stuff. And you might, if you're sitting on the couch, do better than that, hustle. But, it's about like your mindset overall, right?
Sure. Yeah.
What things do I need to learn? I'm not scared to go out there and get what I want and ask for it and work towards it. It's like, all right, that's what I'm talking about. If you're that person in this current society, I don't think that's as common. I think you'll win.
I think that, obviously they're out there. We just brought a new guy on the team. He's a straight hustler, just everything you talk to him.
But he's not 18, right? He's not 20.
Well, no, but I know people in my age that are useless. Like you said earlier.
Love that word, don't you? Right. He's just useless.
But the thing is, you just don't hear about it because they just got their nose down and they're taking care of their business.
Exactly. Right. They're not flossing and taking pictures in front of a Lambo and trying to.
Do you know how to floss?
I do. I floss every night and once a week on the internet. Stand in front of my Lambo, and it doesn't even run, by the way. It's just a movie set. And then I say, buy my course for $5,000 on sales, and I too will teach you how to make $1 million a month in sales. Wearing my
from
Gucci
my couch?
Shoes. Yeah, from my mom's basement, by the way. It's amazing. So yeah, I think that's it, guys. It was just an interesting topic. Again, it came up in a couple of conversations recently at the park, and again, I see like my daughter's boyfriend is kind of in his master's program, but he's got started in his career, and he's kind of like, should I finish this or not?
He's not useless, is he?
No, he's not. No, he's actually pretty squared away guy. Yeah, he's a good kid. And, my kids, they needed their education because it's very specific what they do. So I think, as usual, it depends. And again, this is how I'll leave it. Like, if you don't want to go to college, do something equally as hard or better. If you can't come up with a plan or anything else to do, go to college, because you don't want to be useless.
Don't be useless.
How about that? That's the name of the podcast. We'll just name it
Can
that.
we put that as a core value? Just bring
Don't
that
be
in.
useless.
Don't be useless.
I kind of like that. Well, we had to drop "do your job" because it sounded too harsh.
We're bringing it back. Don't be
Bringing it
useless.
back. Don't be. How about that? Core value number 1, do your job. Core value number 2, don't be useless. All of them are negative.
Jesus.
All right. Well, look, I don't know if you got anything out of that at all. I hope that you did. If not, if you got kids that are going to college, or you're a kid that listens to this in the fitness space or what have you, I hope it helps. And yeah, maybe every now and then we'll do something out of the box like this.
Yeah, that was fun.
Matt's like, I have no idea what we're talking about, but it's
I
amazing.
gotta go do some calls.
I got to go to work. Quit being so useless. All right, guys. We'll talk to you next time.
Peace.
Peace.